On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm going to tell you why the New York Knicks title window is right now.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? I am Gavin Schall, your Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast and a credentialed media member that's been covering the New York Knicks for nearly a decade. This is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving the most detailed insight on your favorite team. Normally 5 days a week. Recently, it's been more like 8 times a week. So be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing to both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. On today's show, a bunch of fun topics. We're going to talk. First, we're going to reflect a little bit on the win over the Boston Celtics and just how insanely cool it is that we're here, why the Knicks title window is right now, and then get into some of the key battlegrounds against the Pacers that I wasn't able to touch on with Tony. Maybe some of them will be a little bit repetitive, but I believe these are all new ones. And then just sort of some individual questions I have for each Knick in this series and keys to the Knicks ultimately taking this series and ultimately winning a championship. We're going to get into all that right now here on Locked On Knicks. All right, so first things first. Incredible that we're here. We got to reflect on it. We got to talk about it a little bit right after that Celtics game. I meant to do another one of these over the weekend and really dive deep on that. It's been busy, guys. We've been trying to prep for the next series, life to live. But I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it one more time, right? 0-10 in the regular season against Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, 0-8 against Cleveland and Boston. And it just felt like those teams had the Knicks number, right? We had the fourth game against Boston where they were right there. It took the Jason Tatum craziness at the end of that one, the last second three for them to force it to overtime, for them to ultimately win. You had the last game against the Cavs where there was no Donovan Mitchell. I believe there was no either Jared Allen or Evan Mobley. They weren't at 100%, and you still lose to them. And the idea that the Knicks ran Boston off the floor, I mean, first time all season they were down by 30 plus points and are just not even going to have to face the Cavs is pretty incredible. And it's just not a place I did not have a ton of faith in either the players or the coach to not to beat a team like Detroit. I picked them to beat Detroit, but to beat a team like Boston, right? It took Tom Thibodeau going outside his comfort zone in a way we have rarely seen him go outside of his comfort zone. And yet, as I say that, I think it might be a little bit unfair, right? We saw him go to OG at the 5 against the Sixers last year. We saw him make adjustments at times against the Cavs, against the Heat in the Knicks' first extended playoff run of the Jalen Brunson era. But going to all switching was something he had just barely dabbled in the regular season. There were so many areas like the starting lineup, as we're going to get to, where he's so inflexible. I had my doubts that he was going to be willing to make changes, and yet he was adaptable. And then the other big area was like, had this team tuned him out? And we heard rumblings all season, right, about the locker room not being 100%. Heck, even this week, you're hearing rumblings about the locker room not being 100% perfect. And yet when it mattered most, season maybe not quite on the line, but borderline on the line in Game 6, the Knicks come out and play what I would say defensively was clearly their highest execution game of the season. They were on point in transition. They were on point in half court. They were catching those ghost screens that Boston just torched them with in Game 5. And it told me that whether it's this team being engaged and being willing to listen to Tibbs, or just them taking it on themselves and saying like, hey, that was embarrassing. Like, I just from a pride perspective, I need to do better on that front. They look like a completely different team. And that team, that version of the Knicks that we saw in Game 6, if you get 90% of that the rest of the way, I think the Knicks are going to win the championship. I have my doubts whether they can do that game to game. But we saw a ceiling that just simply was not present in the regular season or in the Pistons series for that matter. We saw a ceiling with the starting lineup that was simply like not really present. Like there have been 3 times where this team has played like what I would call a championship contender in every year. And this season, the bar might be a little bit lower because of who the final 4 teams are. But it was the fourth quarter against Detroit, the second half of Game 4. You could argue certainly the fourth quarters of Game 1 and Game 2. if you want to extend this list out to 5, and then pretty much all of game 4, but particularly the second and third quarter, or excuse me, of game 6, the second and third quarters of game 6 is where like you see these moments in these stretches in any team that wins an NBA championship, right? Where they are completely dominant. You have teams like the 2017 and 2018 Warriors, right? Where that's all they do. And they are just so much better than the rest of the league. They're constantly at that level. But we've seen it a bunch from Oklahoma City, right? You saw the second half of game 7, maybe aided by a generous whistle to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We saw it second half tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? Where they just elevate to a level that the other team cannot match unless they're playing another team worthy of winning a championship, which in most years, maybe there's an off year where there are 3 of those teams. There's generally only one of those teams that can consistently hit those levels. And for my Dragon Ball Z heads out there, right? It's like going Super Saiyan for the first time. And you get your flashes, the blonde hair goes up, then it falls down. I apologize to people who've never watched Dragon Ball Z and have no idea what I'm talking about. But the Knicks have had those flashes, right? Where their apex is there. I am worried about the consistency against the Indiana Pacers. While the ceiling for this Knicks team is extremely high, I think the floor relative to a team that makes the conference finals is still fairly low for this group, right? And to that point, I mentioned these stats, but I will cite them one more time for the playoffs. The starters are a -5, right? 107.5 net, 107.5 offensive rating and 112 defensive rating, right? Against the Celtics, the starters were almost -10 points per 100 possessions. They got their butts kicked up and down the floor against the Boston Celtics. The fact that they won tells you that, one, Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride were both incredible, which they were. And when the Knicks got what I would consider optimal lineups out there, they dominated the Celtics. They owned the Celtics more so even than the Celtics owned the Knicks starters, obviously, because it was in less minutes and they won the series. So you can imagine just how absurd those numbers are. And you look up any of the Mitchell Robinson numbers and they're just crazy every time he was on the floor. But it also tells you the starters are still not a very reliable lineup at this level. I mentioned this in the Tony pod, but the Pacers starters, conversely, a plus 21.4 net rating. And as we've cited it a bunch, the starters for a long time now have not been very good. A negative net rating since Christmas, basically since teams started putting wings on Cat, bigs on Josh Hart, and clogging up the lane, right? We know all that already. So the question I have about this team is we've seen Tom Thibodeau make the adjustments defensively, right? Go more switch heavy, even offensively, right? Run a little bit more action for Mikal Bridges down the stretch of these games. I mean, frankly, they're running more action for Mikal at all moments of these games. Run a little bit more for OG at times. Use Josh Hart slightly differently, right? To try to punish teams for putting a big on him. They've had somewhat mixed results with that. I think if the Knicks and people will be tired of this and maybe rightfully so, because I don't think it's going to happen, but if they lean just a little bit more into 5 out with Deuce McBride, because we saw about 6-ish minutes of that. That's exaggerating. It was like 4 minutes against the Boston Celtics, and it looked incredible. And I don't know how the Indiana Pacers guard Karl-Anthony Towns without the benefit of Josh Hart being on the floor and them being allowed to essentially double team Cat around the rim with Miles Turner. Because anyone who watched Cat in the regular season against this Pacers team, in 3 games, he put up 30 points, 12 rebounds, shot 57% from the field, 47% from 3, 89% from the line. The first 2 games were in the first 10 games of the season. Teams were not yet consistently putting wings on Cat at that point. And then the last game, I think, was a case of Rick Carlisle recognizing that, hey, this might be a matchup come playoff time. I don't really want them to have any film of what it looks like when I put Pascal Siakam or Aaron Nesmith on Karl-Anthony Towns and I park Miles Turner near the rim. And because of that, and because of the fact, like, Precious Achiuwa started that game. It wasn't even Josh Hart, right? Precious Achiuwa is someone you literally don't have to guard in any situation from behind the arc. And yet they were letting Cat go one-on-one. And it was no Miles Turner that game. So he was bulldozing Thomas Bryant, absolutely cooking the poor guy. I think I have the numbers somewhere in my notes. It's buried. Oh, here we go. Cat had 40, 12, 5 assists, 3 blocks, I believe. That same game, Josh Hart at 30, 10, and 5. So take from that what you will. Point is, if you play Deuce, they cannot play that strategy. They have to guard Cat traditionally, unless they want to risk leaving Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby wide open all game, which maybe they will, given that those two haven't shot great. I don't think you do that because they're both elite 3-point corner shooters over the course of their career. If you force them to guard Cat straight up, I think the Knicks would win this series. And that is probably an oversimplification, but it also has to do with the benefits you get of being able to put Deuce on Tyrese Halliburton, which I'll get into a little later in this episode. You could also go the other way and go double big. Indiana is not a very good defensive rebounding team. We talked about that a little bit with Tony. They are 10th in the playoffs out of the 16 teams that made the postseason in contested defensive rebounding rate. Like, what percentage of contested defensive rebounds do they win? They were 26th, if I'm remembering correctly, in the regular season in that stat. Mitchell Robinson right now is putting together on a permanent basis the best offensive rebounding season in the history of playoff basketball. Not in the last 10 years, not in the history of the Knicks, just in the history of the NBA. He's putting together the best permanent offensive rebounding season or playoff run in history. And that's coming off a million injuries. So that is just incredible for Mitch. I say that to say, it is a risk for the Knicks to play double bigs and crash, right? Because I think in the half court, with all the actions Indiana runs, they are going to be able to pick on the Knicks when those two are on the floor. It is not going to be like Boston, where Boston played for a team that is known for being hyper modern in their shot diet. They played Neanderthal ball. I think Prez made a similar reference when he was on this pod the other day. They did not play smart. They did not run multiple actions at Towns or Mitch. That will not be the case with Indiana, and they're going to hurt you defensively. That might not matter if the Knicks get every single offensive rebound, and Indiana just has no chance to keep them off the glass. And I think that is going to be a real struggle for them if the Knicks go all out offensive rebounding, especially where we've seen an uptick from OG Anunoby in that area. We've seen an uptick from Mikal Bridges in that area. Obviously, Josh Hart, when he's on the floor with those guys, can really hurt them. And it's a risk, right? Because if they do get the ball and everyone's crashing, they're going to get some transition threes. And again, in the half court, they're going to hurt you. So that is a really fascinating battleground to me. And it's why out of the two, quote unquote, optimized Knicks lineups, I would lean more towards 5 out. We have seen it. DJ Zulo had this number, 7 minutes in total in the playoffs so far. So I have my doubts. And there might be a point though. And Benji Ridholt, shout out to him, made this point in the KFS pod, where the Knicks are down 3-1 in this series and Tom Thibodeau's push there. I would prefer if they were proactive and they didn't wait until they were down. Because I think even if you do play the best lineups, I think Indiana's good enough to give them some trouble. I just say that to say I do think there's a pathway where the fact that the Knicks just have better top end talent than Indiana. Let's say that. I think Indiana is more complementary. I think I'm saying the same thing over again, but they fit together better than the Knicks do. They have better depth than the Knicks do. The Knicks starting 5 is more talented in just every single sense of the word than the Indiana Pacers is. That doesn't mean the Knicks will win the series if they don't play smart and they don't play their best. And I think if the Knicks lean into their best lineups, if they play smart basketball, I don't only think they could beat the Indiana Pacers. I think they have a chance to win the NBA championship. We're going to talk about that. Excuse me. Can't speak English. In just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at SKIMS. When I found out SKIMS was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for me. SKIMS changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Personally, I tried the SKIMS cotton 3-inch boxer briefs, and I'm hooked. They're perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape, and they stay in place all day long. Whether I'm working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So shop SKIMS at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and SKIMS stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place an order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. SKIMS is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. All right, what up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. I meant to get to the segment 1, but I am as always a little too talkative. I think the Knicks should respect this opportunity. No Boston Celtics, no Cleveland Cavaliers. Luka Doncic is out, right? To me, he's maybe the second scariest playoff guy in the league. The other two I'd put in the top three. Nikola Jokic, he's gone. Giannis, he's gone. You have Tyrese Halliburton standing in your way. You might have Anthony Edwards standing in your way. You might have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander standing in your way. Those are great players. Those are not guys that I think it's impossible that Jalen Brunson would be the best player in the series. And when you have the best player in the series, you have a chance. I also think the Knicks probably have the most talented starting five left in the field. We can go through it. We can debate it. Oklahoma City is certainly the best team left, right? They won 68 games. They set a record for point differential. They blew out the Nuggets in game 7. They just blew out the Timberwolves in game 1. I think by any objective measurement, Oklahoma City is probably the favorite. And yet, I cannot imagine people watching that team and watching the areas they struggled and how they've struggled to shoot the basketball so far, not only against the Denver Nuggets, but really this entire playoffs, and say that that team is completely unbeatable, especially because we watched, at least in one of the two games the Knicks played. The other one was terrible. Don't watch that one. But the first one, we saw what I would consider a fairly optimized version of the Knicks, or at least an optimized version of their starting lineup, go toe-to-toe with Oklahoma City. And I think with the defense the Knicks have found now, right, switch heavy. Shai is a little bit of a different animal, right? He's tougher to guard in those situations than than Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. But there are plenty of spots to help off of against the Thunder with the way they're shooting. I saw Shax make that point tonight, and I completely agree with it. To further that point, here are the ages of the Knicks' key pieces. OG Anunoby is 27. Mikal Bridges is 28. Jalen Brunson is 28. Josh Hart is 30. Deuce McBride, 24. Mitchell Robinson, 27. Karl-Anthony Towns, 29. Outside of Deuce, they're all smack dab in the middle of their prime. They have a couple of guys in Cat, in OG Anunoby, who have significant injury. Mitchell Robinson, who have significant injury histories. At least for now, game 1. And I knocked my mic right out when I knocked on my wooden desk, so I should be a little less performative going forward. All right, I guess we're going MacBook mic the rest of the way. Anywho, where was I? These guys are smack dab in the middle of their prime. They are healthy. They're not always going to be healthy. They're not always going to be at the peak of their powers. I think it is a fair question to ask, to say, who on the New York Knicks would you expect to be better individually next season? They should have more depth next year, right? They might get to upgrade a bench spot, bring in someone like a Royce O'Neal. They might find one of their rookies from the last few years breaks out, like Tyler Kolek is a key rotation piece, or Pacom Dadier, or Kevin McCullough, or Ariel Hukporti, right? They might have more depth. I'm not sure they will ever have more individual talent in their starting lineup than what they currently have. And NBA windows close quickly, right? We just saw Boston. They thought they had a 5-year window. Jason Tatum tears his Achilles. The second apron is crushing and punishing. And they're going to have to break up a team that I described all year as a perfectly built basketball team. But because they got cold and the Knicks got hot and they didn't optimize their strategy, and Jason Tatum got hurt, and Kristaps Porzingis is dealing with seemingly a brutal post-viral illness, like, their window's gone. Cleveland, super young, incredible regular season. Who knows what their window is? Are they ever even going to get out of the second round, right? These opportunities do not come around all the time. The Knicks have an incredible one in front of them now. Indiana is excellent. They are beatable. Oklahoma City special. They're beatable. Minnesota, really good. Would be a really fun series. They are absolutely beatable. And for people who said throughout the year, maybe this is just the test year, like, no, this is a shot at a title. And it is just not a guarantee you will be back here. And it's going to come down to very thin margins for the Knicks, right? If you simmed the first 2 rounds 100 times, I think the Knicks would have gotten out maybe 15 of them, right? It took a lot of great clutch moments. And the Knicks have some real, that's not all random, right? Jalen Brunson is the best clutch player in the NBA. Mikal Bridges stepped up in a real way late in a lot of these games. Cat had games where he just made crazy shots down the stretch. We got the campaign game in game 1 against the Pistons, but there's a world with, like, slightly worse luck. The Knicks lose in round 1 to Detroit. there's a world where slightly worse luck, they would have gotten swept by the Celtics. I say that to say, like, they have to find a way to increase their margin for error, because I think it is unlikely. We've seen teams like the Heat ride waves of luck, plus skill, right, and plus balls. If I'm allowed to say that, I don't know if I am. To the finals, and typically it doesn't get teams all the way there. So for the Knicks to win this, they have to play like they played in Game 6, right? Which means know your assignments, know the game plan, be just like playing at 120% speed and intensity at all times. And we had 2 losses where the Knicks came out after and said, we relaxed a little bit. That's not going to, that maybe that works against the Pacers. Maybe you can do that one game. Can't do that against the Thunder. You're going to lose the series. Brain farts are inevitable. They won't survive laziness. Like even in the regular season against this Pacers team, going back and going through my notes on those games, Indiana missed a bunch of open threes. Maybe they will again. They're shooting 40% as a team in the playoffs, so it doesn't seem like that's super likely. And the Knicks again can widen their margins for error, and they have some real advantages that I'm going to get into in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at CarGurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. So you need a deal you can trust? CarGurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal rates. The best feature, price drop alerts, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. It's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows CarGurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com, CarGurus.com. All right, guys, we are back to wrap up this bonus edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. All right, let's get into some of the, I'm just going to go rapid fire. I'm emptying the notebook here. Some of the matchups, some of the questions, just some final thoughts heading into game 1. This tweet from Brunson Muse. In the last 10 games against the Pacers, Jalen Brunson, 27.5 points, 6.5 assists, 48% from the field. Karl-Anthony Towns, 29 points, 11 rebounds, 56% from the field. I cut off the tweet in my screenshot, but I believe Towns 5-1 in his last 6 matchups against Indiana. I mentioned again, you go to 5 out. I don't really see how they guard Cat. Frankly, I think if Cat can maintain the level of like aggressiveness and just going quickly that he had, freneticism maybe is the right term, he had against the Celtics in Game 6. I think that would go a very long way to him being extremely difficult for them to guard, even if they can essentially double team every time. I would expect a much more efficient Jalen Brunson. Remember, he like really punished Indiana at times last year, and that was despite the fact that he was falling apart physically. But I think the 5 days off will help him a lot, and the fact that like instead of Alec Burks being his second scorer, which was the case at times late in that series, which is a crazy thing to say, it's going to be Cat and Mikal and hopefully OG for the whole series, and hopefully like a better version of Deuce off the bench. So he should have a little bit more help. He shouldn't have to do as much. I think there are going to be times, which we'll get into a little bit later, like there are going to be situations where OG can really feast. Like if Pascal Siakam's out of the game, I don't really think Indiana has like another person to guard him. I'm really interested to see how that goes. And I think Mikal Bridges, like you should be able to get to some real matchup advantages, and whether he's attacking Turner in drop, which I mentioned is something that they can go to by using Josh Hart as a screener for him and just let him like go at Miles Turner, and they don't have a center that's quite as good defensively, or quite as mobile as someone like Al Horford or even like Jalen Duren was at times for Detroit. So that's an area to attack. Some areas Indiana will attack the Knicks that we mentioned a little bit with Tony. Transition defense, that was a real issue for the Knicks in the early season matchups. Even in the February matchups, like you see coming off a make, like the Knicks don't get matched up. Like Brunson is on Siakam after a make, and it leads to a wide open three for Mathurin, who misses, and then it's an easy putback for Pascal Siakam over Josh Hart, who belatedly switched that. They actually did a lot better in the second half. Cat cannot fall down on drives. I was going to save that for later, but it also falls in the realm of transition defense. And I know sometimes it's out of his control. He's a big guy. He's going full speed. Sometimes he does it just to try to bait fouls. And as we've seen, if he's not going to get a great whistle, then please, God, just do not fall down. Get back on defense. It is going to be hard enough as is with their pace, with their passing, with their shooting. You have to be really clean. And if you're not crashing for a rebound, you better get back. All right. OG Anunoby. The 3-point shooting from him has been pretty erratic. There have been times where he's been red hot. You see game 1, game 3 against the Celtics. And there are times like game 6 where he has 6 seconds to get a shot off and it is short. And him maybe more than anyone, though, I think you see it with Josh Hart at times. Like I've heard Alex mention on the pod the other day, right, that the Knicks are doing pretty well with heavy minutes in these playoffs, despite a tight schedule. And I think Indiana will be perhaps the greatest challenge yet, even if it's not quite as physical of a series against Boston, but because of the ground they're going to cover, right? Both in transition, the pace they play in the half court, the number of actions they're going to run you through. This is going to be the most, just maybe not the most physical miles, but the most miles the Knicks are going to have to cover. And you take into account their bench depth. I'm hoping the Knicks counter, which I'll mention in a sec, with a deeper rotation. But OG Anunoby, if you can just buy him a few minutes, because I think he is the guy who is probably working the hardest. You can make a case for Hart. You can make a case for McHale, the way Brunson gets run through actions. But if you could just buy him a couple extra minutes and he's a little bit fresher, a little bit more explosive, I think those threes will start falling for him. And I think we'll see more and more takes to the rim, which is an area that had a little bit of an uptick in game 6. And again, there are going to be times with OG, especially when the matchups get scrambled and especially in transition, where he's going to have real advantages. And again, I'm stealing this point from the great Benji Ritholtz, but when he gets switched onto Tyrese Halliburton, he needs to run the floor and he needs to put Halliburton in the stanchion. We've seen OG do that a bunch this year, less so in the playoffs because he's mostly been matched up with burlier guys, and players like Cade and Tatum can kind of hold their own against him. But I think we saw in that long stretch, he's someone who can make a difference with his one-on-one ability. Last time we saw him in the playoffs against the Pacers, not counting game 7, where he was obviously playing hurt. He was dropping 28 points in 28 minutes in that game. And he was incredible. And I think he can really hurt this team. Josh Hart, I think at times his mental errors get exacerbated when the minutes are high. And Jalen Brunson, I'm curious how he handles full court pressure. And I would hope you have Josh Hart taking the ball up the court a good amount of the time and that is the one advantage of, like, if Indiana does not want to play things straight up and they want to put a center on Josh Hart, by all means, Josh Hart, buddy, you're bringing the ball up the floor, because they are not going to pressure him full court with Miles Turner, because Josh Hart would go right by Miles Turner and it would be 5-on-4 every single time. So that is a way to cancel out the pressure and also not to get into your offense too late. And the Knicks are very, very good late clock. I think Samson Folk had I'm really stealing from the KFS guys. Sorry, boys. Stat that the Knicks were second in efficiency in late shot clock situations, and the Knicks just have killers in those situations, right? Obviously, Jalen Brunson is always going to be great in those situations. Josh Hart at a point this year was the most efficient player in the NBA in late shot clock situations, and he just seems to have a knack for making those shots. I think it is going to be a balancing act for the Knicks to play with pace in the half court, to get good early looks, just because this is going to be a higher scoring series. And the good news is, like, Indiana does not have the same quality of defenders, right? To throw out someone like Jalen Brunson, like as good as Nesmith and Nembhard are both quite good to very good defenders. It is not Drew Holiday and Derek White, right? It is going to be easier than that. And the Knicks are going to be able to create advantages earlier and create good shots earlier in the clock, versus living on, like, all right, Brunson makes some magic happen. All right, McHale makes some magic happen. And they are absolutely going to need to take advantage of that. And they can't. I think you are playing into Indiana's hands if you bail them out and go late clock over and over again. Yes, it could slow them down a little bit. I don't think that trade-off is worth it. I think you're going to have to win some higher scoring games relative to the first 2 rounds, which, if you look at the scores the Knicks had in the first 2 rounds, right, it was like 90s basketball. I would expand the rotation if I was Tom Thibodeau. I absolutely think someone like DeLon Wright could really help you this series. I was advocating for him to play against the Celtics. Defensively, he is taking nothing off the table. In his one stretch of playing, we saw him hit some threes. Solid playmaker, can drive to the basket, has played in big games, smart player, takes nothing off the table. Tom Thibodeau's probably not going to do that. That's fine. Then give Campaign a slightly longer leash, especially at home, right? Where role players are generally going to shoot better, are generally going to be a little bit more comfortable. Give Campaign an opportunity because he played well against the Pacers during the season. And again, if you just play him for 4 minutes and you just kind of wait for him to make a mistake, guys are not going to play well. Guys are not going to play confident doing that. And ultimately, like I think you're going to need some depth to get through this series. And Campaign can help you, and he can create advantages against his defense. And TJ McConnell, like someone who killed the Knicks last year, like I'm sure he can get to his shots. And he's going to get to his turnaround. Like if you don't put a taller guy on him, he's going to get to that turnaround. He's going to make it. I think Campaign is a pretty good option to guard him. He's quick and he has great hands. Precious, some spot minutes, just not at the same time as Hart. Ideally, definitely not with Mitch and Hart, but switchable big. And he had his moments last year in the playoffs against the Pacers. Again, if Mitch is healthy and out there, not going to play a ton. 5-6 minutes here or there, I think you can do that with Precious Achiuwa. You're hoping for an uptick in the wing 3-point shooting. OG was at 36%. Mikal has actually been worse in the playoffs at 33%. Both getting closer to 38 would go a long way. Some of the low percentages are a product of what I mentioned, the fact that teams do not really have to play off them in the corner when you get to keep your big at home because of Josh Hart. So that is part of it, but it would be nice for both of them to shoot better. Did seem like Mikal got a good rhythm going in transition in Game 6, so that was exciting. I mentioned the trade-offs with double bigs. I'm not going to go too far into that. I'm hoping for more Cat initiation. If it's Siakam on him, I think Cat can burrow his way through Siakam and just sort of chisel his way to the rim at times. Like we saw in Game 6, the Celtics were still playing Cat the same way. And he was just saying, like, I don't really give a you know what, right? And like first play of the game, he hits a runner over both Cornette and Al Horford. He starts going back to like the move that I think defined his regular season, right? Which is that quick pickup just inside the foul line, 2 steps. Again, unless your center is home and in front of him early, like, and if he goes quick, even if Miles Turner is nominally like playing in the paint, he might not be able to get to Cat fast enough. So the key is Brunson gets Cat the ball quickly, and then Cat attacks immediately when he gets the ball. You can also do that on sideline out of bounces are a great chance to get him isolated for a quick face-up on a wing and not let the big get home in time. Keep firing up those quick trigger transition threes. Again, there is some line there of what's a good shot and what's a bad shot. You would like the 3-point volume to be up a little bit. And also like if they're going to like occasionally put like, if it is Nesmith on him, get him some quick seals, right? And if Cat goes fast in those situations, he can have an opportunity one-on-one. There's generally going to be someone wide open in the corner. Cat was not making that pass all series. So that's an issue. If he starts making that pass, you're going to get some open threes for Mikal, for OG. Even when they double, if he plays off 2 feet, we saw it the last regular season game against the Celtics, he can still get easy shots and he can make those easy shots. Defensively, has to know the coverage. Has to. I think the Knicks are going to try to simplify things as much as possible. It is a challenge to just play one way against Indiana. And where he excels is blitzing. Caitlin Cooper had this stat also on the KFS pod. Indiana is more efficient against the blitz than the best pick and roll offense in the NBA in the playoffs. So that is a tall task to blitz Tyrese Halliburton and play 4-on-3 because they have so many good passers. They have so much shooting. It is a real challenge, and they can take advantage of that in a way the Pistons sometimes did. Sometimes that was Asar Thompson dunks, but couldn't always when you blitzed and we're playing 4-on-3. It's going to be multiple coverages. He's going to have to fight his way through. Like they're going to run Spain pick and roll. They're going to run ghost screens with Cat. Like what the Knicks had against the Celtics was their bigs would switch, and then Boston would say, great, our job is done. We're just going to attack one-on-one. That's not going to happen. Another screen's going to come. They're going to make the Knicks, like, this is going to be a challenge for Mitchell Robinson, too. They're going to have to make multiple decisions. That's going to be really hard. It's going to take a lot of energy, both mentally and physically, for Cat to keep that up. All right, a couple really quick ones because I'm running long. Brunson, I hope they run Nesmith through a thicket of screens, and that's the matchup. Brunson took those matchups personally in the regular season, had a good amount of success in them. He's comfortable shooting over Nembhard. Deuce, again, I made the case for starting him. He's defensively your best screen navigator. someone who could return the favor a little bit and pressure Tyrese Halliburton the length of the court and actually bother him a little bit, which I'm not sure Mikal Bridges will have that in him because he has to expend so much energy on the offensive end of the floor. We saw the Knicks in the regular season. They had good success in game 3, running a Payne, Deuce, Shamet, Precious, Cat lineup. So around Cat was shooting, good things will happen. Deuce plays well against his team. It was big in game 5 and game 6 last year. I mentioned Mitchell Robinson. Josh Hart has had some beastly games against his team. Can the Knicks actually weaponize when he is not being guarded by Indiana? Dribble handoffs, get Mikal Bridges going downhill, get Jalen Brunson going downhill, have him set stagger screens, have him set pin-in screens, and take and make open threes. Mikal Bridges has elevated his rebounding rate this playoff, plus 4% defensive rebounding, doubled his steal rate, nearly tripled his block rate, 2.5 times his block rate. Shout out to Shwinny Poo for those numbers. Needs to keep the activity up. That is pretty much everything, guys. I'm incredibly excited for game 1. I hope you tune in for a post game. One more podcast coming tomorrow with Alex and Prez. Tune in for that. Until then, I'm Gavin Schall. We'll talk to you soon.